Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Panel Presents Comic Talk. Today, we're going to catch up with what our guests are doing in quarantine land, the first comic conventions they ever went to, and our top picks from our favorite cliffhangers. It's all coming up next on Comic Talk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Comic Talk, where we get together with a panel of guests to talk about our favorite print medium. With us today, we have the Duchess of Free Comic Book Day, Ashton Greenwood.
Hey guys, what's up?
From Sapphire Studios, we have production manager Johnny Rose.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for watching.
And our special guest from a comic shop in Winter Park, Florida, Aaron Haaland. Is it Haaland or Holland? I should ask before this. Haaland. Okay,
yeah,
I was right.
Like Holland Oats and whatnot. Yeah.
Well, welcome everyone. How's everyone doing?
Doing good.
Yeah, good times.
Good.
All right. Before we get into the show, I want to talk to our guest this episode, Aaron, to ask him how he got into comics a little bit.
Oh, how I got into comics. I just wasn't any good at sports, and you have to have something. So I was left-handed, and I wasn't really catching up with the T-ball stuff. They're like, oh, just do the opposite of what we're doing. And then my dad said that if I quit T-ball, I could be a quitter for the rest of my life. And I was like, man, Dad, you waited till I was 5 to tell me this? And so I quit T-ball, and I was like, I just wanted to do comics. I had a comic book store in my hometown of Vero Beach called Tropic Comics. I walked in that store, and the owner of that store just took an instant liking to me. And I sorted comics for credit. I got 25-cent comics. I mowed lawns to buy comics. And it just, to me, comics were where the source material, everything was at. Like when Ninja Turtles came out, I loved the Ninja Turtles cartoon, but the comics were way more hardcore. And it just instilled in me this idea that comics are the source. That's the secret source of all pop culture. It all starts with comics. And that's the vein I want to be tapped into for the rest of my life. So.
Oh, that's awesome. And see, and look at you now. Now you actually have a shop, a comic shop. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I had to come up with a name for a comic shop, and every really clever name I came up with was already taken on GoDaddy.com. And this is back in 2004. And then I just was like, it was 3 a.m. I was like, I need to come up with a name for a comic shop. I typed a comic shop in, hit enter, a comic shop's available. I was like, screw it, I'm going to bed. It's called a comic shop. So that's what, and as far as the location, it's right across the street from Full Sail, which is a film and video game school. And there was a record store going out of business, a vinyl record store. And I just went in and asked him for the landlord's phone number and went for it. So. And
you're not that far from Disney either. What, maybe 30 minutes or so? 30, 40 minutes?
We got annual passes to Disney. And that's also a cool way that we've been able to get a lot of creator signings is because, they'd want to come to Florida, to Orlando for Disney anyway. So.
Oh, that's really smart. Okay, one other thing, because we were taking a look at some of the pictures earlier and we saw the Geek Easy. Please explain this super cool part of your shop.
Yeah, the Geek Easy, it was okay, so the landlord had some extra space open up that was in the back of the store and then a couple units over to an L because there was some hairdressing school that went out of business. And he was offering it to me cheap. And I was like, I couldn't do that because it'd be people could just shoplift back there all day long. And I said, it could be a speakeasy and we could call it the Geek Easy. And I just said that as a total goof, and everyone loved the idea. So then I had to do it. So I had to get a beer and wine license, a food license. And we made it so that you'd have to walk through the comic shop to get into it. And you'd have to walk through the comic shop to get out. So it kind of took that whole gift shop Disney model, that, the Geek Easy is the ride, that's what people experience with the karaoke and nerdcore artists and just movie showings, different things. That's the ride. And then we're the gift shop. And it's wow, this is an awesome gift shop, so that's it. It just got kind of crazy, me having to handle 2 businesses and I sold it, but it's still there. It's still the Geek Easy. It still is what it was, it's just not me to keep me up all night. So
that's
it
really
was successful enough that someone wanted to buy it from me for a profit. So I did that. I thought it over and I'm like, you know what? Comics are my real passion. This was fun, but there's parts of it that aren't that fun. And there's actually no parts of comics that aren't that fun, So I don't want to sound spoiled, but it just is what it is. For me,
very true. So we all know that right now a lot of comic shops are closed to the public, but Aaron, that hasn't stopped you from continuing to do business. So what are you doing during quarantine to keep things going with the shop?
Well, the first thing we did was we heard our store was shut before other stores in Florida because we're in the same county as Disney, and Orange County closed down earlier. And they said, well, what are we going to do now? Like employees of other comic stores are being laid off and whatnot. And I just told my guys, I was like, they're like, what's the sales goal? I was like, the sales goal is to sell every comic book in this whole friggin' store before we're allowed to open up again. That's the sales goal. We're going to Wolf of Wall Street this. We're going to swing big, because if we swing big and fail, we can just say like, oh, it was COVID's fault. But if we swing big and succeed, we're the guys that succeed in spite of all this. So it seemed like a reverse Spider-Man situation where we had great power and little responsibility. And I was like, wow, I'm going to do this. So we were doing like a Tuesday nights and Wednesday nights live shows. And we said like, well, let's do more. And let's do videos promoting, filling people's holes in their collections. And let's do a 24-hour show. We did a 24-hour show on a Saturday and Sunday 2 weeks ago. That was insane. We got Jason Aaron on it to interview him and Scotty Young to interview him. And just the response. There's a lot of comic fans out there that want entertainment. They want more comics. New comics weren't coming out, but we were selling all kinds of stuff. There's so many comics that come out every month. There's a lot of stuff people missed or things that they fell off of that we were doing great deals and providing entertainment, and people were responding to that. It was like it was 2006 again, the amount of engagement we got from our posts and whatnot. So it was
That's
crazy.
Incredible. That's
yeah,
really,
we made
really
our sales goals. We made our sales goals that we had as we were open. So it's fun.
That's amazing. That's really cool. And you had a great fan that popped up in the comments. Garcia was saying that you're the best shop in Orlando.
Garcia. Yeah.
There we go.
He reminds me of What's the Story. That guy is cool. I really like that guy. But we just wanted to focus on the fans, all the stuff that comic book shop owners were posting online and everything. We're all, thought pieces about distribution and about publishers and how it's all going to come back online. And, that's all, well and good, how the sausage is made type of stuff. But I was like, well, what about the fans? How can I engage with them? How can I put them first? How can I really try to, connect with my customers that can't come here and other fans of comics? And I've just figured if I put the fans first, everything else would fall into place. It doesn't matter if distribution shut down for a while or printers are shut down. We have comics. Fans want to talk comics. Let's talk comics. So.
Oh, that's awesome. That's a great mentality. And I'm sure that all your regular customers will be super excited once the doors open again, because everyone will be able to pick up where they left off with reading their favorite titles.
Yeah.
And speaking of reading, it's time to find out what our guests are reading or podcasting or watching or creating. It's time for What Are You Doing? So we want to ask each of our guests, what are you doing? We want to know what you're reading, watching, podcasting, creating, etc. to pass the time in quarantine land. And to those watching, let us know in the comments what you're doing by using what are you doing? So let's start with you, Ashton.
Oh gosh, okay. So there's a show on Netflix called Outer Banks that I'm obsessed with, literally obsessed with. I cannot stop watching it. It's this weird Goonies meets beach adventure. They're looking for sunken treasure from the Royal Merchant, which I've recently discovered is an actual shipwreck. So that's exciting. They're looking for this sunken treasure, and they're also fighting with what they call the kooks, which are the rich kids on the island. And it is chaotic. It is a complete disaster. I cannot look away. It is incredible. It's highly recommended.
That's a good show. No, it really is. I get the Goonies aspect with the kids searching for a buried treasure kind of thing. It's a good show. What about you, Johnny? What are you reading, watching, podcasting, other than this?
Other than this, I've been pretty busy creating all of these streams for Previews World. So we have our Previews game night that we do Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. We have Previews World Weekly also at 4 p.m. That's on Wednesdays. And Comic Talk, which you're watching right now. Aside from that, I've said this in a past show that I was watching Lock and Key on Netflix, and I've had the first trade paperback for the longest time and never got around to reading it. So once I finished the show, I was like, well, it's finally time to pick this up, and I finished it. And there are certain things I've liked about the show, certain things I didn't like about the show, certain things I did and didn't like about the comic. One thing I noticed is that I don't know if anyone else has watched Lock and Key versus reading the trade paperback, but the Sam Lesser character is much more fleshed out in the show. I don't know if it gets any more into his character development in the trades because I've only read the first trade paperback. I loved it, though. I thought the art was amazing. I thought the writing was really good. But now that since I'm done with that, I have picking up Scotty Young's Middle West. Well, Scotty Young wrote it. Jorge Corona is the artist on this. And I know that Aaron was mentioning that he talked to Scotty Young. Scotty Young's one of my absolute favorite artists. And like I said, now while Scotty Young didn't draw this, it still has a pretty hyper stylized artistic style that kind of reminds me of Scotty Young's work with like Spider-Man, Deadpool, and even like his Wizard of the Oz work that he's done in the past. So Middle West by Scotty Young and Jorge Corona, that's what I am currently doing.
Nice. I knew the minute that Aaron said something about Scotty Young, you were like in the background, like, yes.
Right.
Aaron, what are you up to? What are you reading, podcasting, creating right now?
I caught up on all the Star Wars comics. I'm a big Star Wars fan ever since, I was born. I was born in 76 and Star Wars came out in 77. So huge Star Wars fan. And the books come out like so many so often. And I kept up with the prose novels and the TV shows and all that. So I caught up with the comics. And these new books are amazing. They take place in the time period between Empire and Jedi. And there's several new titles now. And Dr. Aphra is coming back, I think, on the 27th when Marvel resumes shipping again. That's going to be one of the first ones back is Aphra #1. But they all take place right there, like right as the credits roll from Empire. So, it's not a spoiler. Like when you first see Boba Fett, you know that exactly the time period because you see Han Solo's frozen carbonite in the back of Slave One. Like, it's like, oh, cool. So, he doesn't just go straight to Jabba. So let's see what happens. Let's see how this unfolds. And you see Luke right after losing his hand and Lando finding his place in the whole menagerie of the rebellion. And I'm just really psyched for this because I always like this stuff. My sweet spot was after Jedi because I love Ewoks. I just love Ewoks so much. Like anything Ewoks. Like I had my first teddy bear was like a Wicket, So that was.
I missed it. I had that too.
Right. That was my sweet spot. Like anything that has Ewoks post Jedi, I love. Like, did you know they were used as like PTSD kind of like animals for rebel soldiers after Jedi? That it's in one of the prose novels, and they volunteered themselves because they loved how much the rebels helped liberate their planet. That they volunteered to be kind of like PTSD companions for rebel soldiers. It's in one of the Aftermath novels. When I read that, I was just like, oh, I'll tear. But
that is so sweet.
But after Empire, like obviously Empire is the best cliffhanger of any Star Wars movie, almost inarguably. Like I could just say that as right. Like, it is. So having something that shows how they got from that cliffhanger to the opening credits of Return of the Jedi is actually like a really sweet spot that Marvel and Disney and Star Wars is doing with the Marvel comics right now.
That's awesome. Oh, look, we have Troy joining us. Hey there, Troy.
I was actually
bothered to show off.
I know, right? I thought the show was at 5. I swear to God, I had no idea. My bad.
That sounds like a lie.
I'm so serious. I've only done one of these, so my bad. Sorry, guys.
Well, Troy, you're just in time. We were just going over our first segment. What are you doing?
Okay, cool. Oh, what am I doing?
Yes, it's your turn.
I'm being late. Hi, everybody.
Well, we know that one.
All right.
So, Troy, your turn.
Yeah. So, what? I guess actually, it's kind of everything I've been saying for the last couple of shows. Actually, I'm plunking down Tom Strange. I'm sorry, Tom Strong, and I'm going to start reading that soon. And I've been watching a lot of Killing Eve and Avatar: The Last Airbender. So that's been my life in quarantine land, so to speak.
Oh, you're digging in there for like the long series. Okay.
Yeah. Well, I didn't know it was going to be a lengthy series until I started it, and I'm like, it's going to be like Lost all over again. I hate it.
Well, you have nothing else to do. Plenty of
But you
time
love
right now.
Lost.
That's true. That's fair enough.
All right. Let's see what we have in the comments. What do we have people in the comments? Let's see. Amanda eating nachos in Colorado. Nice. Very nice. I need some nachos.
Extremely specific.
Josh, I'm watching Aaron being absolutely awesome and one of my favorite people. What are you doing? Hashtag nice shades.
Oh, I'm in Florida.
True. Sunglasses are hitting.
Funny.
Oh, I thought Aaron was going for a thing.
I mean,
So did I. It's a look.
didn't take them off when I came in. I don't know.
All right. Garcia says, I'm reading my stack of comics. Aaron has told me that I hadn't gotten time to get to. So it's been very fun. I've all caught up on things. Oh, it looks like Garcia's going to be coming back for some more stuff.
Okay, nice.
All right. Now with that, let's move on to our next segment first.
You always remember your first.
this intro.
I will never get over that.
I just like seeing the guests' reactions to it the first
There you
time.
go. There you go.
So anyone who knows comics knows that fans really love their first issues, their first appearances. So for first, we want to talk about some momentous firsts that have happened in our lives. So for this episode, we want to ask you, what was the first comic convention that you attended and what was your reaction to it? And for those of you watching, let us know in the comments what your first comic book convention was by using hashtag first.
Oh, wow.
This time, let's start with Aaron.
What? You started with me last time. All right. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Cool. My first thing, I'm from a small town, Vero Beach, like South Florida. So my dad drove me and my best friend that, I had a friend that loved comics. We both loved comics. We were kind of each other's only friend. And took me to the FX show in Orlando. It was a toy and Comic-Con. And I was just in heaven. Like, it was insane. Like, Star Wars figures, like I spent every dollar I had. I asked my dad, like, can I get an advance on like mowing the lawn for like a couple months? But I was able to buy like weapons for the Star Wars figures that I didn't have the weapons for. I was able to like fill holes in any comic that I was missing one of that the comic shop in Vero Beach didn't have. It was before there was any cosplay, because this was back in like, I don't know, like late 80s or probably like 88, 89. But I was just that. I just wanted to go more. I wanted more. And, I love how the conventions have grown with me, as I've grown up and had more disposable income and a car I could drive to myself. And then I become a comic book store and I can get, the comp passes to San Diego Comic-Con, thanks to the wonderful Diamond Comics giving me comp passes. And I enjoy that. It's sad we're not doing it this year, but that's it's the first year since I've owned a comic book store not going. But that first experience of just seeing so many different people selling so many different things, like anything that I've ever wanted was like in this room during these hours, and I was just. Mm-hmm. It was like probably what people think of with like religious experiences, like I don't know. This is kind of like that. I don't want to be that. Like this is like these are my people, and we're all coming to worship this pop culture stuff in a way. Like give our tithes and offerings to the comic gods. But
I think religious experience is actually pretty accurate. I think you're on the money there, Aaron.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
I'll admit I cried the first time I went to San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, really? Okay.
I cried a little as I walked through the doors. I was like, it's my home.
Little nerd here.
Yeah. What about you, Johnny?
For me, the light shine down from heaven and a little cherub start floating around.
Right, yeah.
Right.
For me, I don't know if I'd really call this a comic book convention, but back in the day when I went to it, I would call it a comic book convention. It was a small little show that was held in Silver Spring, Maryland. It was at the Silver Spring Armory, and it went up. Oh, Troy's looking like he remembers this.
Wow. Uh-huh.
Do you remember going to some of these stories?
You literally are stealing mine. I was actually going to say the same thing. That Silver Spring Armory, you would go into the doors, up the stairs, and into that room at the top that was probably about the size of Aaron's Geeky there in the back of a comic shop. And it wasn't that big. It was probably, what would you say, maybe like 30 or so people with like tables and comics that they were selling around that. Right.
Yeah, but I mean, it wasn't that great. There were no big media stars. It was just like the sheer pleasure of just going through and rifling through the bins and finding stuff. And I actually want to share this screen because this is actually where I kind of have it like a side story in here. Let me see if I can. Give me 1 second. I got to share my screen here.
A side story.
Yes, there is this quick
little side mission here.
Yeah, so this I remember going there and picking up Superman #9 from, I think it was 1987, I believe. And I remember seeing this cover there, and I was aware of Superman and Batman, but up until that time, I solely thought that like each hero had its own villains and its own character. So like, I don't know how old I was. I must have been really young, but when I saw this cover, it blew my mind. It's like, oh my God, like the Joker is come from Gotham and is now invading Metropolis. Like, that's something like probably a lot of people like may take for granted these days, because like there's all kinds of crossovers like left and right in comics. But when I first saw that and I saw that cover, I'm like, oh my God, this is crazy. I need to know more about this story. But I think I will always think fondly of that small, tiny little comic book show that I went to in Silver Spring, Maryland, and picked up that title. So for me, that was my first comic book convention.
And so, Troy, yours was the same convention?
It was actually. I can't remember if it was called Jubilee or Clandestine. I remember those two words being like related to this convention. It was one of the two.
I think it was Jubilee.
Or maybe it was like Jubilee Presents Clandestine. Yeah, something like that. But yeah, like it was downtown Silver Spring, which is now a movie theater and a Baja Fresh and a giant parking garage.
That's sad.
I mean, they built up the area because truthfully, Silver Spring back then was a bit of a slum. But the bright side of it was that you got to go to this convention, and I think I went twice in my youth, and both times I remember distinctly the first time discovering back issues and discovering that I could actually just read stuff from like several years ago, just using some of my paper route money, and I remember being very big into the X-Men at the time. I don't think the cartoon had come out just yet, but it was about to drop. And so I just grabbed all these 80s X-Men comics, and it was all just Chris Claremont and John Romita, Chris Claremont and Paul Smith, Chris Claremont and Mark Silvestri. And they were just random issues, but I was just the joy of piecing together an arc, or even like just like the history of the X-Men with these little 30-page snippets, it just kind of like sparked my imagination. So yeah, that's just so funny that Johnny had the same experience I had, X-Men instead of Superman, but still the exact same experience. It was just a musty place that smelled like back issues, and I loved it.
Musty place.
It was.
I still drive by Silver Spring hoping I'll just look over and I'll find like a certain area where it's tucked away and it hasn't been demolished yet. Nope, it's gone.
Yeah.
Yep.
Aww.
Yeah. What about you, Ashton? What was your first?
So my first wasn't actually like a comic book convention per se. It was a horror convention. And I was really little when I went. I want to say it was like late elementary school, maybe early middle school. And I remember being completely blown away by the cosplay. Like the level of costumes and like special effects makeup was shocking. And in my young state, I was truly, genuinely like afraid of some of these people in their costumes because it was so impressive. And it was just crazy to me that like that kind of community existed. Like I had no idea, and that's one of those things where like you don't know subcultures exist until you're a part of them. But it was so crazy, and everybody was so completely on the same wavelength, and I couldn't believe it. And I was like, this is insane. I kind of love this, but I'm also kind of terrified. But I want to come back. I never did go back to that particular convention, but it left a great impression.
Was this
I also
hard?
have no clue what convention that was, but apparently it still exists. I'm not sure what it was because I was talking to a coworker. I was talking to Matt about it, and he knew off the top of his head what it was.
Was it horrifying?
It was in Hunt Valley.
I think that's horrifying. I think that's the one that they do in Hunt Valley every year.
Oh, you have to go back now, Ashley.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was in Hunt Valley, so if that's the one. Like, that's the one. Now that I know, I can go back and maybe not be traumatized.
That's awesome because conventions are how I got into cosplay too. Mine was an anime convention though, and I was like definitely that little like weeby anime girl. It was like right after yaoi paddles and around like the glomping time. And I was just like, cosplayers, this is so awesome. I gotta do it now. Oh, the things that conventions do to us. What do we have the comments in the do we have any comments? Amanda, Comic-Con 2016. I was part of the Umbrella Corporation as a cage zombie. Best experience of my life for being in a cage for 3 days. As a group, we raised around $2,000 for pop culture classrooms.
Oh,
That's
nice.
really awesome.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That's
I get stuck in a cage for charity.
Right, yeah,
Maybe.
yeah.
To be in a cage. Wow.
But we're all in cages right now.
Yeah, well, ooh, touche, touche. And on that womp womp, let's move on to our last segment, top picks.
Wow, wow.
All right, for this round of top picks, we want to ask you, what are your top comic book cliffhangers? These are your favorite WTF moments in comics. You can let us know in the comments by using hashtag top picks. Let's start with Johnny. What's your favorite comic book cliffhanger?
Oh, I am. It's tough for me to pick. We talked about this quickly, not quickly, kind of a little bit at length actually, on Previews World Weekly on Wednesday, and I think that the viewers who submitted a couple answers to us like really knocked out of the park. What it was the Captain America Hail Hydra, like that, like
Oh wow. It's a controversial take there, Johnny.
Nah.
Oh, did Johnny freeze?
Oh no.
Oh no.
He's frozen.
He has.
Oh,
he
wait.
has
Oh.
There you go. He's back.
He's back.
He's back.
I'm
There it is.
talking like Max Headroom.
Yeah, you really are.
It wasn't me this time. Yay.
I remember when Captain America was in the Hail Hydra situation. Like I remember hearing about that so much from people who weren't in the comic book industry or didn't even like read comic books. Like that was the first time I remember comics getting that much notoriety for a storyline since like the death of Superman. I don't know. I mean, that may not be 100% true because I kind of fell out of comics for a while. I got back into it within like the last 5 years. So, but I think just from my limited knowledge, I think for me, it's the Captain America Hail Hydra.
Nice.
Good choice. Good choice. What about you, Aaron? What is
Solid
your
pick.
big comic book cliffhanger?
Well, for me, the king of cliffhangers in comics is Brian K. Vaughan. He nails that single issue story where it has a beginning, middle, end, even though it's part of an arc that's going to be collected in a trade, even though that's part of an ongoing limited run. You know, he did that with Why Last Man. He's doing that with Saga. He did it with Paper Girls. But really, Why Last Man issue 1 was what solidified him as like one of my favorite.
I love that.
Because I'd read him in other stuff before that. You know, he did some Swamp Thing and he did a few things, some Green Lantern before that. But when that Why Last Man, I was a big Vertigo head from the beginning of Vertigo because, you know, I was kind of like goth in high school and I like Sandman and all that. So I wanted to check out anything Vertigo. But when that first issue Why Last Man hit, and it's a society that's like all the men are dead except for this one dude and his monkey, And I was like, well, how and what happens next, and what is this world like, and all the different like socio-political ramifications of that. It had a scene where the garbage collector used to be a supermodel, because that in a world with no men at all, like that was the job she could get. Where and I think like I forget who it was, maybe with like the Secretary of Education was now the president, because every other member of the cabinet was dead, and it just that world he created by just saying, hey, there's some type of virus or something that killed off all the men. I both wanted to know what happens next for this society, and why is this one dude left, and what's up with this monkey? That's weird, because and then what happens? How does society function? Like, how does it move on? It was just the coolest cliffhanger of like, I couldn't get that next issue sooner. So, and then I could sell it as well too, as a with my comic retailer hat, like, hey, this is this, boom. Do you want to know more? And most often people were like, yeah. So
I want to change my answer. Why the last name?
Can you do that?
That is one of the comics that actually got me back into comics in the first place. After my big long hiatus, I picked it up, and I want to second what Aaron says. As soon as I was done that first trade paperback, I could not get to my local comic shop fast enough to continue that storyline. Absolutely love that.
Yeah, Saga, I was going to agree with on that one as well. Saga is just so good. What about you, Ashton? What is your favorite comic book cliffhanger?
So when we talked about this on Previous World Weekly earlier this week, I talked about Archie Comics in the relaunched run that Mark Waid did and everything, and I talked about his Archie's like fighting with Reggie for Hiram's attention or not attention, or for Hiram to not figure out that Archie destroyed his house, and there was the hashtag "What did Reggie do?" thing that just like Pop has a secret about Reggie and nobody knows what it is, and it just hung in the air for several issues before it got addressed. But also another one that I realized after we had finished the show was Undiscovered Country, which I'm obsessed with. And in Undiscovered Country, at the end of issue number 3, they'd been kind of trying to avoid the Destiny Man once they had gotten inside America, and they're jumping through all of these hoops to avoid him and his clan of people, and Daniel just walks right in and is like, hey, bud, what's up? And it's like, why would you do that to all of us? Like, I was genuinely upset. He blew their cover, blew his own cover, ruined it for everyone. I was like, well, I needed to know, why did you go in there? What does he know about you? Who is the Destiny Man? Actually, I think the Destiny Man, just like as a concept, is a great cliffhanger. It's like, who is this person? Why does he have antlers? What is going on?
What's up with that?
That is a very important question to ask. What about you, Troy? Any guys with antlers for you, Troy?
No guys with antlers for me. I don't think so. Maybe if I think hard enough. I'm going to give a different answer than I did on Previous World Weekly. These both just came to me right now. It's just partially because they were sitting across from me. This is kind of like more in line with what Aaron was saying. Sometimes like the best cliffhangers are just the number of questions that are being asked throughout the issue itself, not necessarily the last page. And so I recently acquired a bunch of Warren Ellis and Mike Deodato's Thunderbolts. And the thing I loved about this was it came with the heels of Secret Invasion, which was this big Marvel crossover, which basically saw Norman Osborn, aka Green Goblin, become the hero of the United States. He stopped an alien invasion. And of course, this just drives all the superheroes up the wall, especially the ones who know his secret identity, particularly Spider-Man and Tony Stark. And so he's being kind of lauded as this hero, and he's being lauded as this, like, this champion. And so now he becomes the head of the Thunderbolts, which was previously this villain team. This team of superheroes, this team of villains who became superheroes. But now it's him and a bunch of other villains, and like it's Norman Osborn at the helm, and of course he's nefarious, but the best bit at the end of one issue was, Norman has this, if you've seen the movies, of course, Spider movies, Norman has like a bit of a schizophrenia thing going on. He hears voices and all this other stuff. And he's sitting in like a meeting with his secretary, and it's like, business as usual. She's giving him the minutes of the day or whatever. And Norman's just gazing off into the window. And then he kind of stops her short. And he's like, wait, what did you say? And she's like, oh, I just said that you have a 2:00 tomorrow. And he's like, you didn't say Spider-Man? And she's like, no. And he's like,
What?
you didn't say Spider-Man. And she's like, no, I didn't say Spider-Man. And he's like, oh. And he just reaches for his pills and his hands are shaking inside his desk. And then it just said to be continued. And it was just like, nothing good's going to come of it. It's like, this is just a disaster waiting to happen. And it just gets worse and worse as it goes along, because it's Norman Osborn and some of the worst superheroes in the business just pretending to be like good guys. The only other one I could think of actually was a shared one. It was a cliffhanger that I know me and my friends at the comic shop back in the day at Alliance were just up in arms about, and we just chomping at the bit to find out what happened. Grant Morrison did a run on New X-Men, and he introduced this character named Zorn, and Zorn has become kind of a thorn in any X-Men fan side since then. But at the time, he introduced Zorn, and like Zorn had been going through this last several issues of New X-Men, like this holistic woo-woo, like, you know, I meditate and like, you know, I do like, you know, I teach people about self-healing type of character. And then all this stuff goes down, and I won't give away too many things, but the big catch is that we find out at the end of, I want to say X-Men 149, that Zorn this whole time has been Magneto. And I remember like I was working with at the comic shop. Like I had one of our barbers was coming in every single week to find out when 150 was going to come in, and like, you know, we were just chomping at the bits to find out, like, wait a minute, they pulled the rug out from under us so well with this. We got to find out what's going to happen next.
And that's one of those cliffhangers where you want to go back and reread to see
exactly.
Should I have picked up those clues? Does this
right?
Jive? You know, like
right.
Those are like some of the best cliffhangers in shared universe stuff like that.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So you definitely experienced that one too, Aaron, huh?
Oh yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, what about you, Mia? Like, I want to get your opinion. Like, what do you think is a good cliffhanger in comics?
You know, I am a trade paperback reader just because I hate having to wait for cliffhangers. Like, that's my thing. I'm like, no, I don't want to have to wait for a whole another issue in another week. I already do that with TV. So I read a lot of like the trade paperbacks. So I mean, Lock and Key, I don't know why I grabbed number 2, but Lock and Key, and I think part of it is like the genre itself, that kind of like horror fantasy genre really lends itself well to cliffhangers. But then you've got Joe Hill writing, and you know, if you don't know, Joe Hill is Stephen King's son. And I swear he's got that same like the characterization, the pacing, the anticipation. And so there were so many times where I was like, I'm so glad I have the next one, because if I had to wait for another comic to come out, I would be so upset. So Lock and Key was like one of my favorite. With it had some really good sections where I was just like, I'm so glad that I have the next one, because this cliffhanger would have killed me.
I think there's stories that have come out that are now, of course, have been collected for years, but in retrospect, like every now and then I'll read a book and I'm like, man, they had to wait a month for this? Like, this must have been brutal. Like, I couldn't even fathom having to wait after the last issue, you know? So, yeah, I like comics are interesting in that way.
Yeah, no, I mean, I have my ones that I'm like diehards of, like, I have to get the issues, because I mean, like Saga's one where I'm like, if that comes out, I have to go get it. Like, does not matter. But yeah, for the most part, I'm like, no, wait, the trade paperback, so that way I don't have to get these cliffhangers. But sometimes it's worth it.
Sometimes it is. A good cliffhanger, I kind of feel, is always worth it, actually.
Well, I've only got the first trade paperback for Lock and Key, so as soon as like the comic shops reopen, I'm heading right to a comic shop to like continue the story, because I need to continue. I mean, I know what happens in the show, but as we all know, like comic books and any kind of TV show or media that like is based on the comic books can always change how things happen. I mean, we've obviously seen that with The Walking Dead, so. But yeah, I can't wait to pick it up.
Or Riverdale, Dark Archie.
Dark Archie. What did Jill say the other day? The Archie Dark Universe.
The Archie Dark Universe, yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I love that.
All right, guys. Well, we're coming to the close of our show, but before we end, let's go around and do some plugs. So, Aaron, Ashton, Johnny, Troy. Let's start with Aaron. Is there anything that you want to plug? And then where can people find you online?
Right now, we're mainly just living on our Facebook page, the A Comic Shop Facebook page, and we're going to be live selling and entertaining with trivia and interviews and toys, comics, graphic novels, all that, all day, starting at midnight. I'm not going to bed tonight. So starting at midnight, and then the entire day of the entire day of tomorrow, the Saturday that would have been formerly known as Free Comic Book Day, we're going to be live selling. And then what I'm going to be doing on that show to make it the free element is everyone that buys something from me on that show, I will look at what you bought and hand pick one more comic for free to put in there that I think you would like based on what you bought previous. Like
Nice.
if you bought this
Awesome.
stuff, it's either gonna be another thing by the same writer or something by that character or franchise, but that's what I'm gonna do. So it's gonna be fun. I gotta keep myself busy.
I
Yeah,
love
love
it. That's a great
that.
idea.
yeah, that's a good
Yeah.
idea. Yeah.
All right. Speaking of Free Comic Book Day, what about you, Ashton?
Yeah, so sad face, Free Comic Book Day would have been tomorrow.
Mm.
But you can find me online, Free Comic Book Day, on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. That will also be the place to figure out what the new date is once we pick one. Also, Free Comic Book Day website and the newsletter. We will hit you up and let you know when that new date is a thing. We still want you to get free comics. We still want to celebrate. It's happening, just not tomorrow.
All right. So we'll have to wait a little bit. All right. Johnny, what about you? What have you got going on?
Well, I am making Troy and Ashton look good every week with the
Ooh.
Previews World content that we are doing. So you can tune in to at Previews World on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. We do our game night streams Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. We do Previews World Weekly Wednesdays at 4 p.m. And we have Comic Talk here every Friday at 4 p.m. So you can find all that at Previews World on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch.
All right. What about you, Troy? Sorry
Do you
about
have a cat?
she
It is
jumped
like
in
a
my
cat.
lap. Sorry.
Right. A cat just propped up on Mia. That's hilarious. Yeah, I do Previews World Weekly every week with Ashton, and when I'm on time, I am here doing the panel with you guys.
Some people.
You can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. Just type in TJA Comics, and I'm happy to talk about any type of comic you want to, even the ones I haven't heard of before, because I'm always looking for new stuff.
All right. That sounds good. Well, that's about it for Comic Talk. I want to thank all of our guests for joining us. We'll be doing this every Friday at 4 p.m. So be sure to hit that subscribe button so that you can get notified whenever we go live. And also tune in on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 4 p.m. for Previews Game Night, where we get together and play some games where you can join the audience and play along. And every Wednesday is Previews World Weekly, also at 4 p.m. So you can find all these shows by checking out previewsworld.com on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch. And until next time, remember, not all heroes wear capes, but right now there's a lot who have to wear masks. Thanks, and we'll see you next week. Ow. Oh, can you just sit?